The web is full of tons of great guitar riffs. You can easily use all those great riffs when you learn to improvise guitar solos here in the Chop Shop. Hi, I'm Bonar. I'm a guitar player and guitar teacher in Canada, and this is the Chop Shop. Learn to improvise guitar solos. The Chop Shop is a practical 3-step method. Step 1, learn some of your favorite guitar riffs. Step 2, learn to see those same guitar riffs in a way that makes them easily portable, movable, and reusable so that you can use them to improvise guitar solos. Step 3 is learn to assemble those same riffs in a way that makes musical sense and that tells a musical story. And this is how many pro players improvise guitar solos. In Chapter 1, which was already delivered in YouTube Shorts, we learned to play a dozen different lead guitar riffs from a number of different popular songs. And if you haven't seen those, have a look at the shorts. I think there's 18 episodes or something. This is Chapter 2. Here we're going to learn to take those same riffs and make them portable so that we can move them around and move them into the key signature of the guitar solo that we're creating. This is a standard way that we learn to improvise guitar solos. As a beginner, we get started by building a vocabulary of our favorite riffs and learning how to weave those riffs into our own improvised guitar solo. Also, after today's exercise, I'm going to give a very quick explanation of how we can use the pentatonic minor scale as a tool to help us see our riffs in context. Makes it easier to understand how they fit into the song and how to move them around. So stick around to the end. I promise you'll find that section helpful. I also want to ask you, as we work through this, if you have any questions or if you have a suggestion in particular of a riff or a solo that you'd like to see included in the course, please just leave me a comment and I will be monitoring the comments and I'll respond if I can or include your suggestions where it's possible. So what we're going to do is we're going to review riff 1 from the first chapter of the Chop Shop. And that's a riff in the key of E. So here's the riff. And so what we're going to do is start off by looking at the riff we learned in Chop 1, and let's lay underneath it a framework that will help us to make sense of where that riff is. And that framework, of course, is the pentatonic minor scale. So here are the notes of the pentatonic minor scale drawn underneath our riff. And this gives us a context of the location of the riff relative to the neck and relative to the pentatonic scale. And I will point out that the root note for the key of E is highlighted in pink. And so, of course, that's the 7th fret on the A string in this particular pentatonic grid. The root note is like a registration mark on a simple stencil. We just line that circle up on the neck with the location of the root note. Okay, so in our example, that's the note E on the 7th fret of the A string. And then all the other notes in this grid will be in the right place to indicate an in-key application of the pentatonic scale. And I'll point out, if you're fiddling around, you want to play with the pentatonic scale, now you can play your riff, and you can play any of those other notes that have dots on them, and those will be in-key notes in the pentatonic scale. So you can see how the pentatonic scale shows us what we are playing and the context, where that note that we're playing and how it fits within the pentatonic scale in the key that we're working in. So let's say that we want to use this riff in a different guitar solo from the one that it came from. Say a guitar solo where we might be building a guitar solo in the key of A. So that's a different key. We need to quickly and easily move that riff into our new key signature. And here's how we're going to do that. To move this guitar riff to a new key signature, we simply drag this same pentatonic minor scale diagram that we have here along the neck until the pink circle of the root note is now located on the note A instead of where it was on the note E. Okay? So the pentatonic grid helps us understand in a simple, practical way how this riff fits into the song it was borrowed from. And by dragging the whole grid to a new place on the neck, we ensure that this riff will fit into the new song in the same way that it fit into the old song. And that's all there is to it. We need to go through this exercise with each riff that we want to use when we're building a new solo. And that's obviously a learning method. And the idea here is that we will eventually build up more and more skill in using this method to move our riffs into new locations for different solos and different songs. At first, it makes sense for us to use a careful, systematic method like we're doing here, and this helps us reduce the risk of mistakes and helps us not place riffs into the wrong key. With practice, we build up the ability to migrate riffs into a new location on the fly without having to work through the systematic process in the future. And that's a very exciting skill to build. So that's what we're working on here. We're going to wrap up the main section of this video shortly, but stick around afterwards because we're going to have a quick further look at the pentatonic scale grid, and you don't want to miss that. So here's what we did today, and it is a series of steps that you want to repeat as often as you can because we want to turn these steps into a habitual way of perceiving and reusing the riffs that we want to put into our vocabulary as you improvise your own guitar solos. So step 1, find a riff you want to reuse. Step 2, learn that riff and write it down on tab. It's a good idea to draw the notes for your riff onto a map of the pentatonic scale, like we did today. This locks in our awareness of where the riff is located on the grid, and it helps us build into our consciousness where the grid is around the notes that we're playing, so we know what the nearby notes are, and that's always helpful. 3 is find out the key signature of the song that the riff comes from, okay? And we can look that up by finding the tab on Ultimate Guitar, one of the tab repositories, or just playing along with it and figuring it out yourself. Step 4, find out the key signature of your target song. So if you're going into a new song that's in the key of B flat or the key of A or the key of G, you need to know what key signature you're going into. Step 5, take the riff that you've learned and knowing where it lives on the pentatonic scale, using the pentatonic scale as your roadmap, we drag the whole pentatonic grid to the new location onto the target key signature note, anchor note, of your new solo. And now you'll have a map of where that riff is in the new location. And that's all there is to it. Okay, so here's the bonus section I talked about. Today we used the pentatonic scale, and the pentatonic scale has become broadly accepted as a generic framework for lead guitar. As you saw today, and as you'll see in future episodes, we can play a lot of lead guitar in any style using riffs instead of scales. And that really is a fast-track way to go rather than noodling in the scales. It's very helpful to use the pentatonic scale as a simple framework to help us understand in a practical way where a riff is located so that we can easily move it around and use it in a song that's in a different key signature. That's a key principle. We have to learn how to migrate the riffs to where we want to use them. This diagram shows us the pentatonic scale we looked at today. This pentatonic diagram may look a little bit unfamiliar to those of you who've been working with the pentatonic scale in what we often hear referred to as the A minor pentatonic scale. This is the extended pentatonic scale A form shape, and it's called the A form shape because this particular version of the pentatonic scale is built around the shape of an open A major chord. With the extensions below and above its main block, it spans a reach of 3 octaves and moves you diagonally across the neck. As we saw today, we just line up the note of the key we want to play into the marked root position in the grid. So in the A form grid, the root position is located on the A string, and you can see the pink circle there in the diagram. So to play this, use this grid and to play in the key of A, we would drag this grid to the point where the 12th fret on the A string is lined up in the circle on the diagram, and that places the note A in the diagram. That places the whole grid into the key of A. Okay. It's extremely convenient for us to play it diagonally across the neck because it gives us a large span of notes that we can play in an ascending or descending order, all in one shape. It breaks us out of the limited box thinking of the traditional box scale patterns. Now let's look at a second pattern that you'll find a little bit more familiar. Diagram 6. Here we have a second pentatonic pattern that you'll probably recognize if you've worked with the pentatonic scale at all. So what you can see here in diagram 7 is that these two patterns are basically like puzzle pieces or like little model train cars. They connect together at the highest and lowest positions. So using these two patterns, the A form pentatonic and the E form pentatonic, you can actually play across the entire span of your neck just using these two diagrams. So there's a lot less material to learn if we want to develop a familiarity with the location of the notes in the pentatonic scale. And as I'm suggesting in this video, really the way to do that is to practically use this framework as a way of understanding riffs that you're learning. And through repeated use of these diagrams, they will become familiar terrain, and the shapes and how to use the shapes of these two patterns will become familiar and easy for you. This is just a very quick introduction to these two patterns, and we are going to look at these patterns again in future episodes and help you build that familiarity. Okay, that brings us to the end of today's episode of Learn to Improvise Guitar Solos with the Chop Shop. If you found today's episode helpful, please click on like, click on subscribe, and subscribe to the Bonar Guitar channel. If you want a PDF of the handouts for this video, click on the link in the description below, and you'll be sending us an email, and we'll email you back a PDF of the material from this episode. I'm Bonar. I hope that you enjoyed and learned from today's lesson, and I hope you'll visit the Bonar Guitar channel again soon.